Have you ever wondered why certain fantasies take root so deeply in your mind, why they return uninvited at night, echoing in your daydreams, whispering their way into your silence? Society teaches us to fear them, hide them, bury them under layers of shame and guilt. But what if I told you your sexual fantasies are not something to be suppressed, but a secret mirror of your soul? A coded language spoken by your unconscious self, raw, primal, brutally honest. They are not just about desire, they are about identity, about power, about wounds you've forgotten, and truths you haven't dared to confront. Most people think fantasies are just about pleasure, but that's a shallow view. The real reason they exist is psychological survival. We fantasize about what we lack, about what we were denied, about what feels forbidden because deep down, that's where the energy of life hides, on the edge of the rules. The moment you look closely, you'll realize your sexual fantasy is never just about sex. It's about control, surrender, fear, longing, validation, rebellion, sometimes even revenge. Take, for example, someone who constantly fantasizes about being dominated. On the surface, it may seem like a mere kink, but go deeper. This person may spend their waking life being strong for everyone, leading, controlling, carrying burdens. In their fantasy, they collapse. They surrender, not because they're weak, but because they're exhausted. Their fantasy is the only place where they are allowed to let go. It's not lust, it's relief, a longing to be vulnerable in a world that punishes softness. And then there's the opposite, those who fantasize about being the one in control, to command, to be worshipped. It's not just about ego, it often stems from a history of powerlessness. Maybe they were ignored. Maybe their needs never mattered. In real life, they were invisible, but in fantasy, they become gods. Do you see? It's not perversion, it's therapy. It's the mind's desperate way of healing wounds it cannot speak of in daylight. Some fantasize about strangers, about forbidden encounters, about the thrill of being caught. Is it because they're immoral? No. It's because they've been suffocated by rules, by expectations, by the pressure to always be good. Their fantasy becomes a rebellion, a private revolution, a way to remind themselves that they are still wild underneath all that politeness, still dangerous, still alive. Even romantic fantasies, the kind filled with slow touches and emotional closeness, reveal more than you think. These often come from people who were never truly seen, people whose hearts were treated like afterthoughts. Their fantasy isn't just about connection, it's about healing, about finally being held in the way they always deserved. You see, fantasies don't lie. They are raw data from the soul. They are your inner world, speaking without a filter, without censorship. When you learn to read them, not judge them, you begin to understand your own psychology at a terrifying depth. You begin to see that the bedroom is never just a bedroom. It's a theater, and the scenes that play out there, they're often written by the child who was never heard, the teen who was shamed, the adult who never got to ask, "What do I really need?" This is why repressing your fantasies can be so damaging. It's like locking a screaming child in a closet and pretending everything's fine. But everything's not fine, because what we bury doesn't disappear. It festers, it shapes us in the shadows, it influences our choices, our relationships, our fears. You don't have to act on every fantasy, but you do have to listen to it, understand it. Because in every dark corner of desire, there's a message. Some might say, but what if my fantasy is wrong? What if it's weird, disturbing? What does that say about me? The truth is, it says you are human, complex, torn between the sacred and the profane. And this is where philosophy begins. not in answers, but in the courage to ask uncomfortable questions. Let's begin to decode it all, piece by piece. Let's take the mask off desire and look at it as it truly is. Not shameful, not dirty, but human. If you fantasize about being dominated, tied up, told what to do, overpowered, you are not weak. In fact, the opposite. You are likely someone who carries a heavy load in real life. You make decisions. You take care of others. You are responsible, respected, and often feared. But deep inside, there's a craving, not for punishment, but for surrender. For once in your life, you want someone else to take the weight off your shoulders. Your body may be asking for pleasure, but your soul is crying for peace. To not always be in control, to finally rest. That fantasy says you are tired of pretending to be strong. If you fantasize about dominating others, being in complete control, commanding attention, being worshipped, the world might think it's arrogance. But no, it's pain. This kind of fantasy often grows in the soil of neglect. Maybe you were never noticed. Maybe your voice never mattered. And now, in your fantasy, you become what the world never let you be. Important, powerful, seen. Your dominance isn't about cruelty. It's about reclaiming a self that was once erased. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're trying to feel real. If you fantasize about public sex or the risk of being caught, it might seem like you're just thrill-seeking. But look deeper. These fantasies usually belong to people who have lived lives of emotional repression. Always polite, always obedient, always doing what was expected. You lived a life in hiding, so now you crave exposure, not for fame, but for freedom. You want to break a rule and not be punished for it. You want to feel alive in a world that keeps trying to numb you. If you fantasize about romantic emotional sex, slow, soft, eye-to-eye intimacy, you're someone who's been starved of emotional safety. This isn't just about physical pleasure. It's about finally being held without being hurt. You long for someone who doesn't just touch your body, but understands your silence, your softness, your longing. You're not needy, you're deep. And your fantasy says that what you really want isn't sex, it's sanctuary. If you fantasize about role play, costumes, pretending to be someone else, you are not superficial. You are imaginative, and most likely you are someone who never got to express your full self. You've been boxed in by labels, rules, expectations. But in fantasy, you shapeshift. You become a villain, a hero, a stranger, a god. That's not escapism. That's liberation. You're someone who craves transformation. Someone who refuses to be just one version of yourself. And through fantasy, you explore your multitudes. If you fantasize about threesomes or group experiences, it may not be about quantity as people assume. It's often about curiosity. You're someone who wants to understand the edges of life. You're open, fearless, and fascinated by the unknown. Emotionally, you might be someone who grew up feeling disconnected, like an outsider. And now you fantasize about connection that feels limitless, where no one is left out, not even you. If you fantasize about being praised, worshipped, admired, you may be someone who feels invisible in everyday life. Perhaps you were raised in environments where love was transactional, earned through success or perfection. So in fantasy, you flip the script. You become adored for who you are, not what you do. This isn't vanity. It's healing, a deep need to be recognized, to be celebrated, just for existing. If you fantasize about rough, aggressive sex, people might assume it's just animalistic hunger. But often this fantasy belongs to those who were taught to suppress their anger, to stay calm, smile, behave. You may be someone who buried your rage, your fire, your raw energy, and now it leaks out in fantasy. It's not violence, it's release, a safe rebellion, your soul reminding you, you are not made to be polite all the time. If you fantasize about being used, objectified, or treated without emotion, it might seem dark. But it often comes from people who feel emotionally overloaded, always thinking, feeling, analyzing. In fantasy, you escape that. You become pure sensation. No responsibility, no decisions, no identity. It's not about being degraded. It's about being free, even from yourself. These aren't labels. These are mirrors. They don't define you, but they reveal you. And once you see what your fantasies are truly saying, you begin to understand how much you've been carrying, how much you've hidden, how much you're still trying to find. Your fantasy is your body's poetry, your mind's confession. It doesn't care about what society thinks. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply shows you the truth.